What's going on, YouTube? Wavy back. Hello again, my fellow Middle-earthers. Something a little different today. We are going to be starting a little bit of our own side quest, in a way. Today we are going to be starting with the appendices for the behind the scenes of Lord of the Rings, the original trilogy. This was something that was recommended to me a very solid amount. I had originally planned on just potentially watching this on my own time. I made a post asking you guys if it was something that you might be interested in me just recording as like a side thing as we go along. And you guys seemed to really be interested in the idea. So here we are. This playlist is like 94 videos long. All the time frames range pretty drastically, but I will be condensing each episode into about an hour each. So just however many episodes that takes to fill that slot, that's roughly just what I'm going to go with. I know there's some videos that are like slightly more than an hour, so those will probably just get one dedicated video for them. The frequency of which these episodes go out is probably going to fluctuate to start, just because I don't know how long this is going to take to get through it all, because this is like, it's 94 videos, so I mean, it's a lot. But it's really just going to depend on copyright more than anything, and how much editing is going to be required to go into these, because I know I had mentioned in the post, I don't want these to like take up the movie slots that I'm doing. So these are really just going to be like sporadic postings. There's probably going to be multiple per week, I would assume, especially if they don't require as much editing as like a movie would, which I'm assuming they probably won't, but it is still, you know, a production company's product, so we'll see. I'm excited to jump into this. There's so much I'm looking forward to finding out and hearing about how it was filmed. So much of the scenery shots, so much of the prosthetics and costume designs I can't wait to learn about. And if this is your guys' first time seeing these videos as well, feel free to join me on this journey and see how these movies were created in such a magical fashion. Yeah, without any further ado, the future intros for these videos are probably going to be much, much shorter, since they are just going to be jumping into a continuation. I'll probably just do a, quick little intro, hey, hi, and let's get right to it, since I'm going to assume that most of the people that are on, episode 15 are the ones that were interested before episode 1 even dropped. So, with all that being said, all links to the videos that we watch for these playlists and this playlist itself, of course, will be down below. Please go show love to this channel. I believe it's pronounced Pajasek99, and this amazing playlist they've put together. Yeah, and feel free to leave a like, comment, let me know your guys' thoughts on all this, and subscribe if you're new. You are totally welcome to join us on this journey and all future journeys with the movies that we take on, because obviously there's only so much Lord of the Rings to go around. We just watched Back to the Future, and that's a fun trilogy to start. But yeah, like I said, you're more than welcome here. Without any further ado, let's jump into these videos. Alright.
Hello, welcome to
Hello.
the Appendices. As you probably know, the book The Lord of the Rings has got appendices as well, which Tolkien used to present a lot of the backstory and the origins of how he created the mythology of Middle-earth. On this first disc, you'll be able to see how Tolkien created the story and how we began our process of interpreting his book. The second disc of our appendices covers everything from when the cast got involved through the process of filming, post-production, and ultimately the release of the movie. Now, if you're like me and you don't, there's a button you can press called Play All, which will allow you to sit back and just watch the 2.5 hours of documentaries that we have on this disc.
2.5 hours.
Run. And then on the second disc, if you press the Play All button, you get 3.5 hours of just documentary material straight through.
Oh my
But
goodness.
please be aware that if you do that, there's also an additional hour's worth of video material and a couple of thousand pre-production drawings, paintings,
That art is sick.
photographs accessible through the main menu.
Thank you. Alright. Well, that was video 1.
I've always thought it was remarkable that Tolkien basically spent his entire life creating what he called the secondary world. You know, he created the languages, he created the thousands of years of history. It's so rich and so detailed that nobody today that writes a piece of fiction is ever going to come close to the sheer wealth of information and detail. Because all of that makes it fiendishly difficult to adapt into any sort of movie.
Behind one of the most ambitious film projects in history is the extremely popular book, the result of the life's work of one man. It was born
John Ronald Reuel
Tolkien in Bloemfontein, South Africa,
Oh.
English parents who had emigrated there. Just a month after his 4th birthday, when John Ronald was in Birmingham visiting his grandparents, his father, Arthur,
Oh,
died suddenly.
damn.
Tolkien became half-orphaned in a country he didn't know.
The absence of a father would have affected him. In a way, he became the father to his younger brother. He was raised by his mother, who he was very close to.
In 1904, Mabel died from complications arising from diabetes. Tolkien was only 12.
Wow.
After that, he was shuffling from one place to another with only
That's-
a guardian to look after him.
That life is quite a complicated one, quite an eventful one for a child.
That's actually
His
insane.
mother had been his first teacher, encouraging him to take an interest in words. Her death cemented his study of languages.
That's
And I
beautiful.
think in those circumstances, the school really was the refuge. And I also think it was a particularly good school for the likes of Tolkien.
King
The school, I
Edward's
would say,
School.
was not remarkable for literary development, but it was very remarkable for producing linguists.
He formed a close bond with 3 school friends, and together they created the Tea Club of the Barovian Society, known as the TCBS.
Tea Club
A
of
small group
Peruvian
based on
Society.
mutual love of heroic legends and sagas. This close friendship and shared interest in ancient languages continued throughout Tolkien's time in Oxford. But this idyllic period came to an end with the outbreak of war. Tolkien departed for France, serving as a lieutenant in the Battle of the Somme. Likewise, all of his close friends were drawn into the combat.
He had a small group of close friends, and a few years later, nearly all of them were dead, all killed in the First World War. Once
That's
again,
terrible.
He found himself on his own. And people do say that the major theme...
It's crazy, yet he still
During
always wrote
Ireland's
about hope,
pride,
you
he
know?
jotted down stories in a notebook which he called the Book of Lost Tales. Tolkien's love of languages would eventually lead to him creating his own, and his lifelong pursuit of creating such language engendered the desire to create his own mythology.
That's just so
He
crazy.
felt deeply that England lacked a mythology.
Well, England has no overriding mythology. We have a lot of folk tales.
That's how I feel about America. We have nothing.
Other people's mythologies. But actually that's a complete mishmash from different sources, many of them French, our old enemy. So for Tolkien, the Romance mythologies were a very difficult thing. He didn't feel that they should be part of English folklore or mythology at all.
There was this vacuum that Tolkien wanted to fill by inventing
It's
his
very
own English
interesting.
mythology. Right at the end of his life, he was still working on the mythology of Middle-earth.
Oh,
He
wow.
died, which was the story that he was writing in the trenches in 1917. It wasn't
Ah.
published until after his death.
Really?
His son Christopher had to step in and do the finishing touches.
Yet during his lifetime, elements of this mythology would reach the world through his novels.
Yep.
Tolkien returned to Oxford in 1925 as Professor of Anglo-Saxon, but 9 years later, an unexpected and seemingly innocuous event would change the life of this Oxford don forever.
You have a story about Tolkien inventing hobbits. There he is, marking his examination papers, which is extremely boring, and he turns over and he finds a blank sheet and he writes on it, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." And that's the start of the whole thing.
And so, the story of this small, nature-loving
Wow.
creature found its way into print.
What an origin.
He had a very exciting time fighting goblins and wargs, and after a terrific battle with the goblins, he returned home rich. This book, with
That
the
he
help of
did.
maps, does not need any illustrations. It is good and should appeal to all children between the ages of 5 and 9. If I said it was good enough to publish, it was published.
With the success of The Hobbit, Tolkien was encouraged
Some
by
power
Stephen
right
King
there.
to write a sequel.
He sat down and began to write the first page of Lord of the Rings without any planning at all. There was no scheme, no synopsis. I mean, I've been through all those first drafts, those papers which all still survive. And it's perfectly clear that he was flying blind. He never intended it to be what it was, and he gradually shaped it.
You're just winging it, huh?
To be a convincing
That's crazy.
story, you've got
That's actually crazy.
what you're talking about. Geography, the history, which
Yeah.
Tolkien had already mapped out years and years before. It was as real to Tolkien as history.
Huh.
Even though The Lord of the Rings is regarded sort of as, you know, the Tolkien masterpiece, he only regarded it as being a very small piece of the mythology.
It was only just the tip of an iceberg. He knew, and he'd written and put into box files, an awful lot that never was in his lifetime known to anybody.
It also gives Lord of the Rings its
Really?
strength, and that is what somehow makes it transcend a piece of fiction, and it does feel much more authentic.
It does.
Especially since it was primarily linguistic in inspiration and was begun in order to provide the necessary background of history for elven tongues.
This was simply an outlet
Interesting.
for his huge imagination, which had been stimulated by philology, by study, and that drove him not just to be a scholarly investigator of it, but to be a
Lord of the Rings was really just meant to be like a
The
proxy.
first volume of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring,
That's actually so
by
interesting.
Allen and Unwin in 1954. It had taken Tolkien 12 years to complete his epic work. By now,
Sheesh.
he was nearly 60.
You did not go around editing Tolkien. That would have been the absolute final sin. After all, he was a professor of English language and literature and knew what he was writing.
Yeah, he had a
I read
pride.
carefully, and on the way to reprinting 1 and 2.
Sheesh.
Over time, the book increased in popularity, eventually becoming the 20th century's second most read book after the Bible.
He
Oh,
was both
wow.
pleased and he was gratified because it proved his point. And there was an element in it, I would have said, of Schadenfreude.
Ah,
They
yes.
told him all his life that he was a kind of, flogging a dead horse. And it wasn't a dead horse. It was a Derby winner.
Tolkien fan clubs
The
began
horse
to spring
behind this
forward
guy.
as soon as the book became well known. Not quite as when it was published. It was published in the 50s, but by the 60s they were starting to appear. He was actually very upset by this because he was actually able to detach himself from his own invention.
The phenomenon of the Lord of the Rings
That's
continues
funny.
today.
The themes of Tolkien are another way of honouring the book because, as we were saying, there's so much detail that you ultimately can't recreate the world of the Lord of the Rings, with everything in the books.
There's a tendency to expect too much of Tolkien and to expect answers that he never intended to provide. And there's
Analogies being placed on his work. He always rejected the notion that the stories were based on World War II and the rise of Hitler and all that.
Yeah.
I think to apply...
Tolkien's famous for disliking allegory and maintaining with great force in his foreword to the Lord of the Rings that this is not an allegory.
As for any inner meanings or message, I much prefer history, true or feigned, with its varied applicability to the thought and experience of readers. I think that many confuse applicability with allegory, but the one resides in the freedom of the reader, and the other in the purposed domination of the author.
Very true.
It's part of his genius that he didn't write an allegorical.
That is really impressive.
That's why new generations of readers can keep on finding meanings from their own lives.
What an intricate mind.
Experience.
I think what Lord of the Rings is very good at portraying is that you can be courageous without having courage.
he was, I believe, writing
Yeah, when your back's against the wall.
thesis of
It is in the dark moment that the eye
Holy
begins to
shit.
see. It's like when you reached your
Did not recognize him.
lowest point.
The likelihood of your success as part of your venture, and that is why Frodo makes such a wonderful hero, because he is a halfling, he is a hobbit, he is small, and the forces
I completely
he faces
agree.
are huge.
Frodo's not the only hero. And of
Absolutely
course, without the
not.
heroism of all the people who helped him, Frodo would have failed. Our fates
Especially Sam.
are connected. I think Tolkien himself, personally, was quite pessimistic.
It's the whole one for all,
But I
all
think
for
there's
one
hope in the books.
combo.
This is a phrase Tolkien used, by the way. Hope without guarantees. A very good description of what his book offers. Despair is for people who know beyond any doubt what the future is going to be. Nobody's in that position because nobody actually knows. In that sense, there always is hope.
That's what's interesting about this story. There's
To
no
a certain
guarantee
extent, yeah.
success. That's something
Yeah.
you can predict.
And since he's a philologist, I think we should think about the word wraith.
Philologist.
All right, what's a wraith? It's related to wrath, which is anger. It's related to wreath, which is a twisted thing. It's related to the word writhe, which is to twist and turn. And all these suggest that actually a wraith is something which is defined by shape, not by substance.
There's this
Interesting.
vacuity, this emptiness, Tolkien's view of evil, kind of a moral vacuum, a lack of independent life.
This is something which is
Looks like a
very
White Walker.
distinctively. But the puzzling thing was that this seemed to be carried out by entirely normal people. And indeed, Tolkien was a combat veteran. Used
Following
his own
orders.
side, did things like that too. Atrocities of the 20th century being carried out by bureaucrats.
Yep.
Well, the people who do that kind of thing are wraiths.
Mm.
They've gone through the
Damn.
wraithing process. They don't know what's good and evil anymore. So it's a curiously distinctive image of evil, and I should also say it's a very unwelcome one, because what it says is it could be you, and in fact, under the right circumstances, or I should say the wrong circumstances, it will be you.
Boromir's a great case of that too,
This kind of fantasy fiction is,
which I think is why they show him.
Well, I think that's
Obviously.
an evasion. It's actually trying to confront something that most people would rather not confront.
Yeah. It's a scary truth to think about.
And when Frodo passes it over, it feels very heavy, as if either Frodo or the ring itself was reluctant to pass it over. Now, which was it? Was it Frodo or was it the ring? If it's Frodo, then we're in a kind of Freudian universe. In that case, the source of evil is internal. On the other hand, it could be the ring that's gone heavy. If that's the case, then the ring is actually an external power and can actually deceive you even when you don't mean it to. Nobody can be trusted because there's something in everybody's heart which is the start of the wraithing process. So the ring works both ways.
Yeah.
In some ways it's an external power, which is
It also calls to
you've got to resist.
that
In some
want for
ways,
power
it's
from
a
within.
psychic amplifier which brings out what your own problems and weaknesses are. It's clear that the ring is in its way addictive. It's got all the complexities of that state. As to what people are being addicted to, it seems to me that's really very clear. It is power. People start with good intentions.
I think it has a profound affinity with technology.
He had a real
Yeah, the industrialization thing.
He described once that the most evil creation ever visited on mankind was the internal combustion engine.
And look at us now.
Incredibly so.
We've totally gotten better about that, haven't we?
Tolkien had a respect for the earth that was profound. The thing about Middle-earth,
I love that about him.
It's like a character in itself, with autonomy and subjectivity, and that's
The world feels alive.
Point of view. All those processes are still happening, and in some respects, they've gathered steam. Things are going faster and faster in that direction, and in that sense, Tolkien's relevance is bound to increase.
As filmmakers, as writers, we had no interest whatsoever in putting our junk, our baggage into these movies. We just thought we should take what Tolkien cared about clearly, we should take those and we should put them into the film.
It's a very understandable and respectable opinion.
I first read The Lord of the Rings when I was 18. I loved the book, thought it would make a great film, assumed that somebody one day would make a live action film.
That's cool. I didn't know he read it so early on.
See it.
You know, I read the books when I was in sort of 20s. And so it always left quite a vivid memory.
I got hold of a copy from my dad when I was about 15, and he said,
They all read it, huh?
About 6 months to read it, and I think I read it in about 2 months.
I've been a Tolkien.
Well, I first read The Lord of the Rings in 1961, and at that point I was totally blown away from it. It was my first year in college.
I bet.
This is something like I've never seen before.
A still from the Ralph Bakshi film on the cover of the Black Riders galloping out of Bree was the image. I remember it really clearly. I've probably still got the book somewhere.
virtually every
That's
line
awesome.
in a significant.
Break it down into what turned out to be a 90-page treatment.
I read that in the middle of '97 and immediately was stunned that they'd actually managed to. There was Lord of the Rings, essentially Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So I became a believer.
It was our first
That's cool.
pass at really cracking the code of the Lord of the Rings, is the way that I sort of think of it as filmable, and it is unfilmable. If you were to just shoot the book page by page, scene by scene, it would just be a mess.
You've got a book. It's a book that took the author 15 years to write. This is a challenging book to try and put
Yeah.
in film.
Yeah.
Things started to happen, like, lines that Elrond would say in the book were given to Aragorn to say in the movie. A line, and I said, we've got to somehow convince somebody to make 2 Lord of the Rings films. We've got 4 weeks to do it.
And Peter tried it off. Bob's impossible to read. He's a completely inscrutable sort of meeting. Played the tape, lights came up, couldn't read the situation at all.
Awkward.
Bob looked at Peter and said, "Now, Peter, why would anybody in their right mind make 2 movies?"
Which shattered them both because they didn't quite know what he meant. He said,
"Is he going to? Yeah.
This is 3 films."
That's crazy.
Well, thank God for that decision.
Yeah.
Once new movies, and that really involved a total restructuring.
I bet.
Page 1 rewrite, basically. And so we invited Philippa on board.
The collaboration between the three of
That's
us
awesome.
came down to Fran and I working incredibly closely together, locked in the hotel rooms, locked in the office at home. We'd come to bits where we knew there was action involved, so we'd just go, they fight. And it turns into 20 minutes of the finished film. Because you just knew
That's
Peter was
funny.
going to come along and do it brilliantly. The reverse, I have to say, is true. Peter did that with the kissing. He would just say, he'd just hand it over to us and say, well, that's your department.
There are probably some times when it was built 2 against 1. When
We lying on the couch completely exhausted because he just shot right through the week, and this was his day off, and he was working on the script.
Yeah, dedication brought to life, though, man.
We sort of fleshed out, had ideas about certain specific characteristics more than anything. The idea of Frodo kind of playing with the ring and what would happen to him.
Philippa and Fran were
Interesting.
Great. They were so enthusiastic. They were so happy.
Sometimes you would start a scene one day, and under your door
That's so
at
cool.
night there would come a few rewrites through.
I love that the screenwriters were so just in love with the story itself.
That big, filled with rewrites. I have to tell you, some are still in the envelopes unopened. Because I was sometimes so tired, I thought, oh hell, never mind.
Into the film are actually the exposition scenes, and by that I mean scenes that have to explain a lot of detail about the plot.
Early on in the development of
Understandable.
Fellowship of the Ring, Peter hit upon the idea of doing a prologue. He knew he was going to have to go through this long period of exposition.
Really do need to get people into the headspace and let them understand some of what we're talking about, so that when the story really kicks in, they've got
give them a little bit of
they've got a
context.
background on things.
And we want to track the journey of the ring to being lost. And you can't do it in more than 4 pages. And so that's what I did. I sat down and I thought about it. And that's where history became legend became myth, and some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. That's where they came from. That survived, actually. They rang me back, and they were great. They just said, we can't believe you just did that.
There are lots of
I bet
things
that felt
in
so
these
great.
and they add a lot to it. Other people are going to complain about the absence of Tom Bombadil.
That's a name I've heard of, but I don't know much about.
Yes, but I mean, this.
What does Tom Bombadil ultimately really have to do with the ring? I know
I have
there's
no
stuff
idea.
in the Bombadil episode, but it's not really advancing our story and not really telling us things that we need to know.
Conception, we just don't mention it. It's just left untold, is what how I like to conceive it.
Interesting.
Talking about ideas to do that, and I just said, well, Merry and Pippin should steal a firework.
Really?
and light.
She seems to have been a very key part of these movies.
You want to see some lightness and fun at the front of this movie because it gets very dark and you're looking for something unexpected. You're introducing 2 main characters. That Gandalf has a firework which becomes Smaug the dragon. So, you want
Smaug the dragon.
to hope moment.
I feel like I know that name. Isn't that like one of the names of the Hobbit movies?
And what we discovered is if you want to explain to an audience about the culture of dwarves, you cast John Rhys Davies as the dwarf, and he'll tell you, he'll show you.
Amazing idea.
That culture.
Royal welcome.
What a goat, man.
Friend, who you're probably not seeing on this, is for a very specific reason, and that one of them needs to remain private, and Peter, by the very nature of what it is that he has to do, is the public face of that partnership.
Yeah.
We were incredibly lucky to have that as source material, that as reference material.
That was a crazy look that I was not expecting to see on a young Orlando Bloom.
They tried a lot of different things, and sometimes they were thought of going in a different direction from the book, and every time they tried to do that, gradually they find...
Just keep going back to what he originally was doing.
And they would start going back to where he had started.
It's almost like it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And so, you know, whilst we're changing plot, we did want to be as accurate as possible into putting his thematic material into the film.
Yeah, there's really not much that you would even want to change necessarily for something that powerful. Oh.
When you're doing 3 films back to back,
last episode.
Start designing the film. He basically pre-visualized every shot. Sometimes with a high level of detail, sometimes just as a sketch.
Just to give everything, even scenes that he may want to cut out entirely, all before he's wasting film, shooting actors and sets and having a
efficient
costing tens of thousands standing around.
We knew Peter spent an extensive amount of time committing the film in its entirety to storyboards.
And he ended up storyboarding all the films, you know, basically every frame we see in these films had already been storyboarded by Peter.
Wow.
And
you get an idea, okay, we pan from this character to this character, we tilt down from this object to that object, but we don't get any feel for how fast those camera moves are, or actually even the logistics. Christian's, if it's a really difficult shot, I might have to just quickly do a third sketch.
Christian understands very much the sensibility that I have, and we started storyboarding as we were writing the script, so we didn't even wait for the script to be finished.
It's his way of checking that the ideas that he has for telling the story are going to work.
They're a cheap pass at the movie. You know, I get to make the movie at a really, really low cost for the price of a few pencils and some paper. But it effectively has put me through the process of making the film.
Yeah.
I've done version number 1, and I can get to look
You
at
get
the movie
like an entire rough draft, essentially.
It was never intended and never
That's so
was
crazy they did
final
the entire movies on
version of the movie.
storyboards like
I worked
that.
with some directors.
The storyboards are all, they're digitized, they're edited together as the shots will or would be edited together in the film, and it's basically a little black and white 2D drawing version of the film itself.
What are you doing? Fried eggs, sausages, and nice crispy bacon.
I've saved some for you, Mr. Frodo.
You idiots! Put this out!
That's so cool.
I was looking at a version like of the Lord of the Rings as almost like a comic book.
Yeah.
With words, and we put temp music with it. Actually,
Really?
Grant Major would draw up the final plans for each set that had been designed.
some of these were initially made into architectural models.
He could actually have them in this little, model.
That's so cool.
A reference point for the set or for a miniature down the road.
Working around our models.
And we'd have it hooked up to a video monitor
that's pretty big.
Freeze frame function on. And he'd say, okay, that's, sometimes you'd just sit there and you'd see him sort of, just pottering around, just trying to work out what kind of camera move he'd want to do for this shot.
That had the figure to the background all to scale and made sense and could actually be replicated when you thought about what you were shooting on the set.
We basically knew that we were publishing.
That's honestly an ingenious way of pre-planning.
Accurate. I was very worried about Bag End because I knew just how small the set was, and once you get 50 or 60 crew members in there, it's going to become cluttered very quickly and very difficult to work in. Also trying to figure out ways to shoot the scales too, because we had Gandalf being
tall as hell,
and Bilbo and Frodo having to be small, and we were starting to get our heads into how we were going to shoot all this stuff. It turned out to be a relatively accurate version of what ultimately was in the film.
Through me,
that's impressive.
Wield a power too great and terrible to imagine.
Bringing the storyboards to life in a variety of ways, and it's called Previsualization, is what it's called. Previs.
That early tech, baby.
Was able to use Previs to help him tell his story. He storyboards into 3D moving cameras. He's a very dynamic filmmaker. He likes big sweeping
That scene,
camera
man.
Just at the ideal moment
my
while we
God.
were in pre-production, Rick McCallum, the producer of Star Wars, came to New Zealand on a trip, and he was incredibly generous at just basically introducing us to their Previs department.
Rick McCallum
That's
and
sick.
George Lucas have been incredibly helpful to
What a
to
collab.
him and to the rest of us.
Previs is doing about 144 shots from
That's
film
sick.
1. The workshop and the art department provide the designs that we use in Previs to build in the computer.
In Previs, and he'd come in, very exciting to him to see his, see his movie coming to life and trying out the camera angles on sets that hadn't been built yet.
Yeah.
First thing we did was the whole Khazad-dûm
Mm.
sketch.
Built basically. So, gradually over the course of possibly a year, this drawing of Alan Lee's had inspired and led to the creation of this hugely complicated, hugely expensive scene.
That's
Peter
cool.
cut out a lot of bits, but it was even wilder. You had
Really?
you had Frodo's point of view going down the stairs, and it's like going, running like this, and
Oh, that would've been cool.
like falling off, all this close.
That would've been really cool.
And in some ways, and tripping and falling and rolling down right almost to the breach and being
Oof.
grabbed at the end, looking over, and then the arrows start coming, gotta cut somewhere.
Ah, that all. I know. That all sounds actually really cool.
I find
Hmm.
the scenes that were born in Previs are often the more imaginative scenes, because you feel brave when you're just devising these crazy shots with little computers and stuff. Ultimately, those crazy shots play an important part in defining the style of the film.
Yeah.
That's where
That's crazy.
feel like I've
It's
been
actually so
able to learn
crazy.
from him, because it's the stuff that I was sure wouldn't work that he makes work, is hearing something that sounds just impossible at the beginning and then seeing how he puzzles it out.
It's honestly so impressive. There's so many, dude. They have so many different, steps that they took before even doing single scenes, which, obviously, of course they would, but just to see the detail and depth. Is that it? Yeah. Just to see the detail and depth that each one had is just insanely impressive. Oh man, that was really cool. That was a really fun first introduction into these behind the scenes, getting to immediately learn more about Tolkien right off the bat, and then getting to jump into just immediately basically into the mind of Peter Jackson and seeing the storyboard layout, the multiple kinds of storyboard layouts, as well as the whole writing process, the screenwriting process, and how the scriptwriters were coming together, and just the passion that they had and the revisions that they came up with. That was really fun. That was really interesting. I know I was not talking all too much in this video, and to be honest, it's kind of what I expected and do expect for the videos going forward, mainly just because this feels like it's going to be more of, at least for the behind the scenes stuff, essentially feels like it's going to be more just like a viewing of appreciation, if that makes sense. Just kind of experiencing and taking it all in. I'll try to give my thoughts, obviously, because I don't want this to just be us watching the video and me staring at the screen. That's boring as hell. But I mean, there's a lot to take in, and it's not like it's a movie where there's necessarily pauses of downtime to just reflect, and I don't have as much knowledge on the filmmaking process to really give detailed opinions on what they're doing, of course. But so I'm really just able to give my thoughts and viewings as a fan, which I hope is enough. But with that being said, future episodes, if and when they come out, assuming you guys enjoyed watching along with me here, will be hopefully much more clean in terms of however this video's editing ends up looking and the intro-outro sequence going forward. But yeah, feel free to leave a like, comment down below what you guys think about the start of this journey, what else you think I should watch. And subscribe if you're new. It's totally free, and you can always take it back later if you change your mind. Once again, thank you. And I will see you guys in the next one.